You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Conveyancer podcast. Today we're talking about a collaboration between Orbital Witness and Simply Conveyancing around leveraging artificial intelligence AI in the business. I have representatives from both organisations on the podcast with me: Sue Bence, Chief Operating Officer at Simply Conveyancing, and Ed Boulle, co-founder of Orbital Witness and real-life rocket scientist as well. Ed, I'm going to throw to you first. Perhaps you might, in the first instance, tell us a bit about yourself and your role at Orbital Witness, please.
Hi, David. Thanks for that very magnanimous introduction. I wouldn't say rocket scientist, but I did start life in the space industry. I was a space lawyer for the European Space Agency, and then through that wound my way into tech. Co-founded Orbital Witness in 2018. So Orbital Witness is sort of part legal tech, part prop tech, in that what we do is we help property lawyers, conveyancing lawyers, commercial real estate lawyers speed up property transactions, and we help firms ensure that work is really consistent. We do that by building software that uses AI to help with legal work like title checking and reporting, and that's what we've been doing with Simply.
Thanks, Ed. Sue, yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Sue. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Simply Conveyancing. So Simply are a firm of specialist property lawyers. We've got about 300 people across our core sites in Daventry and Peterborough and Cardiff, as well as a very large cohort of fantastic property lawyers working remotely. I joined the business almost 2 years ago now. I'm a litigation lawyer by trade, as it were, so I spent a long time at various large legal businesses practicing, running teams, and over the course of the last 10 years really focused on operations, operational leadership, and in particular operational efficiency, quality improvement.
Thank you both. Great introductions. Let's dive right into the meat of the discussion then. Orbital Witness and Simply have been working together. You've launched a service that's going to help the conveyancing sector. I'm not going to say any more. Sue, perhaps you can give us an outline of what the collaboration has been about and what ultimately it's going to deliver for the business.
Simply's mission is to be the first choice for exceptional conveyancing legal services. Everything we do is with a view to enabling that mission, creating the best place to work, ensuring that we've got the best possible tools for our people to use in their delivery of our services, looking at everything that we can to leverage tech to support those goals. So what we were seeking to do here with Orbital was to deeply understand the capability of the Orbital residential product and to see how, with that mission in mind, it would benefit our people, our clients, and ultimately the business. So we partnered together to actually run a pilot, which was really crucial for us to ensure that those goals could be understood and how the product could benefit achieving them. We ran a product review in partnership with Orbital, who I have to say were fantastic in enabling that to be very comprehensive. It involved large numbers of people across our business, from the title checking specialist team. So we do title checking within team. We also have internal specialist capability as well. So those experts joined forces with the team from Orbital Witness so that we could understand the product, we could understand how we could apply it in our particular context, and to understand how we would measure the success of two particular areas that were vital for us: efficiency and quality improvement. So that was the scope of how we started out with that pilot and engagement with Orbital.
What have you done? What is it delivering in the organisation? You mentioned title checking there.
Yes, absolutely. So the product enables us to more efficiently and to a higher level of quality review our leasehold purchase titles. What we saw during the course of the pilot was a material reduction in the time spent on title checking. That has a direct relationship to our capacity, and really importantly for us, earlier identification of complex cases and issues to enable us to ensure that we're putting titles and matters in the right hands. And as I've mentioned, in terms of quality, a better standard of reporting, so a consistent, standardised way of reporting, using the outputs from Orbital Residential through the title checking process to materially benefit the quality of our title checking reports.
Ed, there's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence, and in fact, you've been on the podcast previously to talk about it, so we understand a little bit about it. But how does this product work in practice?
Before I get on to how the product works, I just want to step back and set out the problem, which is when a contract pack comes into a conveyancing lawyer, particularly on a complex case, you're dealing with potentially a can of worms. And until someone gets in there and reads those documents, you don't know really what you're dealing with. There might be showstoppers, there might be issues that you need to let the client know about. So that's kind of problem one, is you don't know what you're dealing with until you crack it open, if you like. Problem two is that that takes time. And that's time of experienced conveyancing lawyers, which then of course impacts capacity to do work, particularly during busier periods. And then problem three is consistency. If you have lots of lawyers, big teams like Simply do, you want to make sure that you know that your lawyers are acting in the same way, their review is as standardized as possible. And so that's the kind of the third problem that we're looking to help with. So with that in mind, what the product does is it takes those documents from a contract pack, like a lease, deeds of variation, title. So we first digitize those documents using a custom OCR engine so that a machine can read them. And then we feed them into our particularly adapted AI system. Our AI system uses the latest generative AI large language models. And what it does in practice is it then reviews those documents and answers about 60 standard form questions. These very much correspond to a title checking checklist that a firm like Simply may have. So they go through and answers the key questions and returns those answers to the conveyancer within about a minute of the contract pack having been received. So you've got that first problem solved. You've got all of those nasties surfaced upfront right at the beginning of the transaction, and it takes a lot less time to review that file. Now, we have 7 experienced property lawyers on our team, and what they do is they build what we call conveyancing knowledge bases. Essentially, it's like instructions to a large language model to teach it some of the skills and knowledge of a conveyancing lawyer. And that enables it to review those documents very effectively, pick out those issues, and then importantly, also red flag where there are potential problems as well. So essentially, it's generative AI, large language models, given some of the raw capabilities of a conveyancing lawyer.
I try in the course of the discussion to really put myself in the shoes of the conveyancer, which is a challenge. I'm not a conveyancer myself, but I'm sat here thinking to myself, well, the naysayers will often kind of say, well, this simply can't replace the role of the conveyancer. The skill is in the understanding of what's there. Tell me about whether the tech is developing in such a way that it's able to review more complex cases, for example.
As Sue mentioned earlier, we started as a business when we went into the residential conveyancing market. We started on the more complex cases on leasehold, and we did that very deliberately, partly because that's where the pain is most acutely felt by lawyers and firms. The documents are more complex, there are more parties involved, there's more work to do, and there's more risk. So it seemed like the best place to get started. Now, actually, we're working with Simply and others now on a freehold proposition as well. So we're expanding out to cover all conveyancing cases. But for us, it made sense, and it's in fact one of our own company values, is to start with the hardest problem first, and that was for us was leasehold.
Sue, what's the response from the team been? Because there's a risk here that I was going to say dumbing down. I'm not sure that that's quite the right way to describe it. Are we augmenting what they do? Are we replacing what they do? I mean, this is an age-old debate.
100% not replacing. And actually, the response from the team has been fascinating and has actually been the best part of the partnership and the work that we've done so far. The reason I was so passionate about having a pilot, a really in-depth collaborative pilot with a really clear scope, success metrics, and a really intense period of feedback, which engaged our core specialist team of title checkers, is because this is very much about change and moving towards, certainly in our view, a better way of doing things, using great available technology to support, not replace, the work of our property lawyers. I'm sure they wouldn't mind me referencing one particular quote that we had from a property lawyer, very experienced, highly regarded title checker at the end of the project. She said, "I wanted to hate it, but now I can't imagine being without it." So we had a large number of people involved, and they approached the project with very different mindsets. Some were truly, this isn't happening, this couldn't do what I do, this isn't going to be of benefit to me. And that's why on site with Orbital, engaging the team and that critical two-way feedback. Ed's talked to the 60 or so standard form questions and flag issues that are identified on a report. There's green, amber, red flags, which identify various things like issues around ground rent or lease term. During the course of that pilot and on an ongoing basis, our team continued to work with Orbital to flag opportunities for enhancing capability. And that was really key to engagement. So absolutely, this would not have worked in our business had we landed the product and said, off you go, crack on. What was critical was to engage our people, our specialists, so that we as a business and they could understand how best to use it to ensure that we were persuaded from a quality and a commercial perspective, and we were on both fronts. And as I say, critically, that we had people in our business that were going to be change agents who were going to help us lead. Also, Orbital had been across our business, explaining how the technology works, explaining what the benefits are, and those benefits have been realised.
The other criticism that sometimes gets levelled is that there's a cost and investment here as well that is, from the sounds of it, and forgive me, relatively sizable and not accessible for high street and perhaps smaller practices. Is there a way that we can tackle that?
When we approach any opportunity like this, we're obviously looking at it with a clear business case. And on this opportunity, the maths were very clear. We've achieved a material reduction in the time spent. I would encourage anybody in a business of any size to understand time, capacity, productivity, utilisation. And when looking at an opportunity like this, go through a process very carefully, very quantitatively, as well as qualitatively, because quality is so important. And that's obviously a key input. But there are numbers of aspects that commercially made this the right thing for us. The quality piece, of course, has a direct relationship to where a firm sits in terms of its risk management, its governance, the relationship with its insurer in a PII context. So those are considerations that are also important to factor in beyond it's going to save time and therefore it should ultimately save money.
David, we work with firms that do hundreds of transactions a month, like Simply, through to firms that do 10 transactions a month. From a cost point of view, we haven't found that there is a blocker as the cost scales depending on the number of transactions that a firm does. The challenge, I think, for smaller firms is working with multiple solution providers, point solution providers, and having the resource and capacity to do what Simply did what Sue described in terms of that due diligence process, working with the supplier to onboard the product. It's just a question of have they, in many instances, got the bandwidth and capacity in their teams to do that, which is why I think discussions like this are very helpful because they can learn a little bit about how others have done it, even lean on the fact that others have done some of that due diligence as well. And we obviously step in and help as much as we can with that, helping firms to show that their use of AI is compliant from a regulatory standpoint, is safe to use from the point of view of their insurer as well. So a good example of this is we provide a written summary that all conveyancing firms can share with their PII insurer when they come to renewal that shows how the product helps them to reduce risk across their title checking and reporting process.
On that point, our experience, and we engage very heavily with our insurer. We think that's a really important area for us to focus on. We ensure that our insurer is aware of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how, really importantly, what we're doing links to our mission around quality, and in turn how it benefits our governance. In my experience, working in law firms of many different sizes, and particularly working with insurers that have indemnified those practices across several decades, what they're interested in is standardization, governance, risk management. So again, in relation to this product, what we were able to discuss with them is how we felt it benefited quality monitoring, and how it aids us in achieving that consistent working practice.
You've both talked about quality, and Sue, I want to come back to you in a second on that. But my developing understanding of products like this, Ed, is that the trial that you've done, for example, with Simply is going to benefit the product more widely because you're constantly learning, you're constantly teaching it new things as you come across them.
So our system doesn't train on any client data, just to be clear, but the process of working with our customers and with firms like Simply, who are very engaged, obviously improves the product insofar as we get useful feedback from the users and ideas and suggestions to make the product better that we can then take into development. But there's no training loop in a technical sense from customers. So we don't use any client data to train any of the underlying models.
Critical to that point, though, and back to the engagement piece, during the pilot, all of the Orbital output was then reviewed and audited by our specialist title checkers, because to the earlier point around change, trust was the critical enabler of enabling change. So the first bar that we had to achieve in terms of this partnership was the trust of our people on the quality side, of course. It was through that process, and on a continuous basis, we audit for compliance monitoring, of course, but it was through that process that we were able to identify opportunities for improvement, and also exactly how the product can be used and relied upon.
Quality is a major concern for your peers, for other parts of the conveyancing sector who, and forgive the question, are critical of volume conveyancing quality and may look at something like this. And you take pre-contract inquiries as a great example of what has been described as a tick box mentality. And again, forgive the line of questioning. Can you allay concerns that by increasing the level of tech that goes into this, that actually we are improving that quality, that we're not just creating inquiries for the sake of it, and we are improving what's going out to the wider conveyancing community?
So my view would be, particularly having regard to this product, is that it should materially benefit that challenge. The other sort of, I suppose, key takeaway of feedback from our team is that Orbital really acts for them as a second pair of eyes. So what it's providing is that first comprehensive, consistent view of the issues, matters to consider arising from that title, and then obviously into the inquiry piece. So my view, based on how we work and what we have seen the benefits to be, is that use of a product like Orbital Residential ought aid the reduction of somewhat ridiculous and voluminous inquiries, because it supports the standardization of those that are relevant, and indeed identifies through this work where perhaps they are not relevant. I completely understand the question, and I certainly understand the narrative around large businesses. What I would say about large businesses, and again reflecting on the PII comment, is that assurance around quality at scale is vital to the sustainability and success of those businesses. So certainly for us, as we continue to grow, what we are absolutely focused on is working with technology that, as I've said before, assists us in achieving the mission of quality. And so Orbital Residential for us is very much a key part of how we want to develop our processes, our consistent working practices, to support as a second pair of eyes the technical capability of our people.
two of the metrics of quality that our customers, conveyancing firms, care a lot about. One is speed of turnaround time. So the speed with which, from the point at which the contract pack arrives, they're able to get back an initial report to their customers. And so this is one of the ways in which we work with Simply to help, which allows them to get a head start on any issues and alert their customer to those things earlier. And that's critically important because that customer may be facing a deadline with his or her mortgage lender. They may need to know about issues early, which could otherwise incur certain costs. So that's one metric, important metric of quality that firms track, that we're focused on. Another one is the quality and the scope of what goes into a conveyancing report. And if you've bought a property, as I'm sure you have, you'll know that this is very variable, depending on the amount of time the lawyers have, depending on how a particular lawyer likes to operate. You could have more or less content that goes into a report. And this is another way that we're able to help, because it just isn't practical for a lawyer to report fully on all matters in their report to their client. And we're able to give them that information that they can instantly pull into their reports in depth, so that the client's getting a much better quality of output as well. So those are just two of the quality metrics that firms are really focused on, that we then correspondingly are also focused on. We're thinking about how to make the product better and better.
And can I say in plain English? So one of the great aspects of the product is the summaries and analysis that are able to be extracted and then used as appropriate in the report in very much, as I would describe, plain speak. So being able to extract from the title that might be in somewhat complicated language, effectively the summary in something that's far more customer friendly.
I guess the challenge for a lot of businesses is really understanding where they can go with technology, that art of the possible. What does that journey look like for Simply, Sue?
We're very much focused on how we can re-engineer the process to maximize the collation of upfront information, utilize that in a way, as Ed was describing, to flag issues early, to ensure that we're engaging with our clients as early as possible on matters that are going to be material to time to exchange, and providing our people with the best possible tool set to enable their matters and their clients. Again, just reflecting back on what has been very helpful for us in this partnership, but is a tenet on which we work with suppliers and how we approach, how we manage matters and how we review process to support that, is looking, when you really understand a piece of technology, at the other use cases that you might apply that technology to. So Ed's already touched upon how the technology can be used much earlier on in the process to identify issues. So when you think about how matters come into a business, how they may be allocated, how you might use this product, for example, as we do now in training on leasehold. There are lots of different ways when you do take the time to invest in understanding the capability in your own context to find opportunities to use it in different ways. And certainly for us, adopting Orbital Residential to this stage is very much phase one. So we have a whole project and program really focused on Orbital and how we can develop other use cases to maximize its impact on our business and to benefit our property lawyers.
And Ed, you've said that you start with the most difficult thing and sort of work backwards from there. What's the roadmap for Orbital Witness look like?
Yeah, so, well, in the spirit of carrying on with difficult things, on the leasehold side, we're looking at flagging buildings that could be affected by the Building Safety Act. Obviously, a big topic for conveyancing firms. They want to know that upfront so that they can fee quote appropriately and manage that work. And expanding out our set of questions and our capabilities to other documents that appear both in leasehold and freehold, like searches and, of course, very topical TA6 forms as well. We are also, as I mentioned, working on a freehold version of Orbital Residential, which is really exciting. That's going to be dropping very, very soon. And the ability to flag where inquiries need to be raised. So what this tells you is there's an awful lot of potential with generative AI to solve a huge number of problems to make the conveyancing process slicker and more seamless.
And as a final question, and perhaps this is a little ethereal at this stage because we're coming towards the end of the discussion. And to you both, really, when will we be in a position as a conveyancing profession to be able to rely on this tech?
It's a really interesting question, David, and one we think about a lot. And there are, for me, three components to reliance. One is practical, the quality of the product, the accuracy of the product, and its capabilities. That, for me, is table stakes. If you don't have that, you can't rely on it. And just to be clear, these firms that we work with, they cherish their reputations. And reputations take a long time to build and a short time to dismantle. And so you need to trust the system in order to be able to rely on. That's a very practical starting point. That's table stakes. The second thing that's also table stakes is a regulatory environment that allows you to use and rely on AI in your work. So we work very closely with the regulators in the legal sector, as obviously this is quite a new and evolving space, regulation of AI, to make sure that firms can use AI, but also use it responsibly as well. And then the third piece is something that we're also working on, which is indemnity and insurance. We were also working on a new insurance product that will wrap around our AI system and underwrite it so that it's completely robust and firms can use it with ultimate comfort that if there is an issue, they're covered and their own PI is protected, which is a key point.
So I think, I don't know if I've ever said this to you, Ed, but the indemnity insurance piece, whilst interesting, wasn't something that I won't say wasn't material. Of course it was material, but what we were most concerned about was point one, to ensure that we were at table stakes. In terms of relying on AI, certainly for us as a business, anything we do has to be based on a deep understanding of capability, based on test and learn assurance and continuous review and audit. I think the danger with any technology, with any opportunity, is taking a plug and play approach. And I have to say, with so much activity in this industry and market around different solutions to solve all different types of issues and problems, I'm not seeing universally the in-depth review and understanding of issues, data sharing, all of those sorts of things that are necessary when looking at bringing in or integrating into your business a technology solution. So reliance for us is very much about ensuring we deeply understand in the context of our regulatory obligations and other obligations, particularly, of course, around data. We apply a very high bar to anything that we look at that looks to be a good opportunity for our people and for our business. So reliance for us in an operational context is very much on a case-by-case basis, subject to significant due diligence and a continuous review and engagement process, which again is why we chose to partner with Orbital Residential, because we were assured that through that partnership we would enable that continuous review.
What we try and do through the podcast is not do overt sales pitches. That's not the objective here. The objective here, in particular with this discussion, is to get people thinking about what the art of the possible is, what's actually going on out there at the moment, and the thinking that has gone into the relationship that you guys have clearly developed over the course of the last few months. So I really, really appreciate the insight that you've both shared in terms of how that's developed, what that thinking has been, and obviously what that roadmap looks like as well. So thank you very, very much indeed for joining the podcast.
David, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's great to have this opportunity for a second time. Really good to be back. So looking forward to perhaps a hat trick of today's Conveyancer podcast.
So
lovely to have been here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to discuss this really important topic.
The Today's Conveyancer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysconveyancer.co.uk. My thanks to Ed and also to Sue. Thank you as ever for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.